Shalom from Israel, and welcome to our Torah for the Nations weekly meeting. And tonight we're going to talk about food, because in our Torah portion we are in the book of Deuteronomy, and there are two very famous verses that I'm sure you all know about food. One of them is in Deuteronomy 8:3, which says, "Man does not live by bread alone, but rather by whatever comes forth from the mouth of the Lord does man live." We all know that one. And then in Deuteronomy 8:10, "And you will eat and be sated, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you." So this idea of blessing God or thanking God after we are sated, after we've already eaten, this is where I got the title, After the Lollipop. I was listening to a teacher talk about parenting, and he was talking about, the candy man is giving out lollipops to the kids, and all the parents are saying, what do you say? What do you say? Say thank you. And so the kids say thank you for the lollipop. But then there's that one child, and the candy man just loves this one child that 10 minutes after, when all the lollipops are gone, this child comes up to the candy man and he says, "Thank you, Candyman, for that lollipop." So this comes straight from the Torah. This idea of the follow-up thank you. Because it's right here in Deuteronomy, Moses says, after you are sated, after you have eaten, then you shall bless the Lord. You thank the God. So what we do, we not only thank God for our food before we eat, but we're in the custom of having prayers of thankfulness after we are sated, after we eat. And so in this teaching for the parents and their children, it was like, if your child receives a birthday present from his grandparents, it's so nice, like 2 weeks later, to say, "Look, Grandma, I'm wearing, the dress you got me," or "Look what I bought with the money you sent me for my birthday." Those are all, they're just very special, like follow-up thank yous. So that comes from the Torah. So we're talking about this, what we have to do as human beings is we have to connect with God all through the day. And food is a big, big way to make a connection with God by thanking Him, acknowledging Him before and after. And He made us. He made us in a way, that we have to eat a lot. And so He's wanting us to have all these ways to connect to Him. So this idea that we are both body and soul, and our main purpose is to connect heaven and earth. That's what we're here doing. You can say it like we're here making the world a home for God. We are here bringing heaven down to earth. We are here doing on earth as it is in heaven. We're taking physical things like food and elevating it to a spiritual level. This is the whole work of what we're doing here on this earth. Because the animals can't do it because they are totally physical. The angels don't do it because they are totally spiritual. But here we are, human beings, the connecting piece between the two worlds. We are both physical and spiritual. We have made in God's image, our soul. But we also know that there's a battle between the mind and the heart, between our physical body and our spiritual soul. There's just this battle going on, because it would be nice if we could just hear things one time and go, "Oh, okay, that's what we're supposed to do," and then be able to do it. But it never works like that. We have to hear it again and again and try to get what our knowledge to come down into our heart and to play out in a practical way, and to turn into an action that we actually do, not just in one ear and out the other. So our sages tell us that, we don't have our holy temple anymore. So they tell us that our home is our temple, and our table that we eat at, that we gather our family around the table, this is our altar. And this is such an amazing thing as women that we can do, that every time that we serve food around the table, and we teach our children to thank God for the food before and after they're sated, and to also talk about God while we're eating, this is how we we elevate this dining experience. I was looking at this article called What Does Your Dining Experience Look Like by Rabbi Yonatan Goldenprint. So he's talking about this idea that we have of our table being an altar. And he says, the most straightforward means of elevating the table to the level of the altar is by interspersing words of Torah throughout the meal. The sages teach us the profound significance of eating when they compare the dining table to the altar in the temple sanctuary. When we sit down to a meal, we should each consider ourselves as the Kohen, or the priest, in the temple, serving before the Almighty and seeking to elevate ourselves through the holiness of His service. Even the physical act of eating, when engaged in with the intention of fueling the body as preparation for the pursuit of spiritual goals, that's how we make this an act of holiness. Eating can actually become a holy act if we do it in the proper way. And the most straightforward means of elevating the table to the level of the altar is by interspersing words of Torah throughout the meal. So we have this power, every one of us, to be like the priest in the temple when we just do a simple thing like eating a meal with our family. We elevate it because we bring God into it. We bring Torah into it. But there's a downside. He says, conversely, when we feed the body, we take care of the physical needs with no thought about the soul, the sustenance of the soul. We not only fail to elevate the table, but liken our repast to the service of idols. That's as bad as serving idols. Indeed, idol worship is essentially the distancing of oneself from his Creator by constructing impediments to spiritual growth. So he's just saying, without the words of Torah to provide a context that harnesses and directs, that's the whole purpose of our time here on this earth, is to harness our baser impulses. We don't want to be just physical beings. We're harnessing it. We always talk about like the racehorse and the jockey, or the ox taking on the yoke of the farmer. We're harnessing our animal self to, it says we embrace our animal nature. This is when we, without words of Torah. That means we embrace our animal nature and sink to a level that deadens our spiritual sensitivity. Rather than transforming the table, we have an opportunity to transform this whole dining experience to be a spiritual act that we can do for God. Rather than transforming the table into an altar before God, our meal becomes little better than an offering to the dead. So it can go either way. So we have this great opportunity, to serve our families, food around the table, thank God for the food, and bring heaven down to earth, elevate the whole dining experience. So we have a Jewish sage called Maimonides, and he has a nickname called Rambam. You may have heard of him. My husband was telling me our sages are like, we have the nicknames like the mafia guys, the Godfather. Well, Maimonides is called Rambam. He has a nickname. Rambam lived during the Middle Ages, which is like 900 to 1,000 years ago, and he lived in Spain. And he was a physician, an astronomer. He was a rabbi, a philosopher. And it just amazes me when I look at some of the things that he was saying about food and about the body that long ago. He says, since maintaining a healthy and sound body is among the ways of God, for one cannot understand or have any knowledge of the Creator if he's ill. Therefore, he must avoid that which harms the body and accustoms himself to that which is healthful and helps the body become stronger. I think that's real easy to understand. That's kind of universally accepted that we're supposed to take care of our body. He says, so the thing is not so much teaching something that's such a novel idea. Oh, I didn't know that. It's like I wish that we just had to learn things like one time and get it. But it's like we always have to be like reminded over and over, because it takes, hearing something repetitively over and over before one of these days it sinks in. Okay, so Rambam, he says, one should not eat until his stomach is full. I think we've heard that before. Rather, they should stop when he's eaten to close to 3/4 full. We don't want to be that Thanksgiving stuffed feeling, but he says to stop when you're at 3/4. I think that's just really hard to do, but we know that we should. And he says, as long as one exercises, exerts himself greatly, does not eat to the point of satiation, and has loose bowels, he will not suffer sickness, and he will grow in strength. Okay? What amazes me about this is that it was just during the Middle Ages. He just by observing his patients, he came up with this. He said, overeating. Now, I kind of thought this overeating was like a modern day problem, obesity and all that. He's talking about it then. He says, overeating is like poison to anybody's body. Overeating is like poison to anyone's body. It is the main source of all illness. Most illnesses which afflict a man are caused by harmful foods or by filling his belly and overeating, even of healthful foods. Like we don't want to pig out on kosher food. And Solomon, look how far that goes back. This was implied by Solomon in his wisdom. Whoever guards his mouth and his tongue guards his soul from distress. That's Proverbs 21. Guarding our mouth means guarding it from eating harmful foods or eating we're too full. And guarding our tongue is from speaking about things that we shouldn't speak about. So Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun. These are things that we all know, but that we just need to be reminded of. So I want to talk a little bit, we all know the story of the spies. And when they went into the land, they came back with the evil report. But they knew this idea that what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to take the physical and transform it into a spiritual. And they also knew that that was not an easy task. And so what I read about the spies, they came out and they said this statement. They said, it's a land that devours its inhabitants. So what did they mean by that? Because, they saw it was a beautiful land. They saw it was rich soil, wonderful climate, large succulent fruits, So what was the problem? Like, why would they say it's a land that devours its inhabitants? So what they were saying, it's not that we couldn't conquer Canaan's inhabitants physically. But they said, but if we reside in this materialistic environment, there is no way we would be able to maintain our current spiritual level. We will be swallowed up by materialism. So they knew what the mission was. They knew that the mission was to take every aspect of our physical life and transform it and elevate it and bring heaven down to earth and do on earth as it is in heaven and make this world a home for God. But they just thought, here we are in the desert. At this point, they were in a little under 2 years, I believe, and they were being fed the manna from heaven, and they were getting their physical needs, but they were getting all their spiritual needs met, and they didn't want to leave that. And so they were punished for it, but God also knew that they needed to learn. And so it was the next generation that went into the land. Okay, so there is a verse that we read recently in Deuteronomy 4:39. And it says, "You shall know this day and take to your heart." So we have two things going on, a knowing and taking something into our heart. And so that's what the battle is. Because it's one thing to know something. I have this joke about, putting in an exercise video. Like, we all know we should exercise and eat right? So knowing it is one thing. That's the easy part. We know it's true. But as we sit there, you put in the exercise video and you're sitting on the couch eating a bag of chips, watching the video, Going, yep, I know I should be doing that. Yep, I can see where that would be very beneficial. Yes, I know I should exercise and eat right, right? The knowing is not really the hard part. The hard part, he says, you shall know and take to your heart. So there's two parts to it. One is to know it, take to our heart. That's where it becomes an action. That's where we take what we know and make a practical application and start doing it. And it, like I said, it would be really nice. I don't know many people that can hear things one time, say, yes, I know that, I agree, that's a good idea, and then just start doing it. It's like it's a repetitive thing, and that's kind of what we're doing here tonight. It's just kind of going over stuff. I didn't say anything that you don't already know, but sometimes it's like, for whatever reason, we get on the right track and we do things right for a while, and then we just, we need to get re-encouraged. We need to just have it repeated until one day it just finally, really becomes part of us. But it's a battle because there's two parts of us. It's called, the Yetzer Hara. That's our physical part. So it says here that you shall know this day and take to your heart that Hashem, He is your God. So a person must acquire knowledge of Hashem, but knowledge in itself does not necessarily translate into action. One must take that knowledge into his heart. Okay. So, how does one penetrate the Yetzer Hara's defenses and impress one's knowledge upon the heart? How do we get the knowledge into the action? It is by persistently reviewing the ideas and contemplating them until the heart can no longer ignore their truth. All right, so we're just going to end with a little story, a little testimony, I guess, from someone who used to be like an overeater. And food was just not a good topic for this person. It was a very stressful topic. And then he got some advice. This is from the book by Rabbi Zelig Pliskin. I've read from this book before. I love this book. It's called Life is Now. And there's maybe 80 some short stories. So this is story number 45. And it has to do with food. Okay, he got some really good advice because he was just saying, I just have a problem with food. I'm miserable. I tried this diet, that diet. So the advice goes like this. He says, transform yourself. All right? So he says, don't berate yourself and don't put yourself down. This is the advice he got. Food is a challenge for most people. Feeling bad about eating is obviously not the approach that will work for you. He says, I suggest that you enjoy food even more than before. So he says, feel a sense of achievement every time you choose a food that is healthy for you. And feel a sense of achievement every time you have the self-discipline and self-control to refrain from eating what is healthier not to eat. It is difficult to forego food when you want to eat something, and surmounting the difficulty can now be a source of increased joy and an upgrade to your self-image. So what he's saying is you kind of redefine joy. If joy used to be getting up and eating donuts, now say, you know what? My main goal is to connect to God, and I'm going to be happier and healthier and connect to God better if I have, take care of my body. So what is my new definition of joy? That's what he's saying, reframe this, transform the whole thing. There's also a statement, it says, nothing tastes as good as abstinence feels. So they're talking about when you have that abstinence, when you have that self-discipline, you have the joy of that achievement. So he says, you don't need to say no to what you don't want. Say yes to what you really want. See, just there's a switch going on in the brain. He said, instead of feeling bad for eating the wrong food and eating too much, feel wonderful for eating the right way. This way, your inner mind will associate a healthy approach to food with joy and achievement. This positive approach worked wonders for me. This is his testimony. He says, not only was I healthier and more fit, but I also felt more joyful than ever before. Food stopped being a symbol of failure and distress, and food was now a symbol of victory and spirituality. So that is really the whole point of this message, is that food, even though it's physical, we can turn it into something victorious and spiritual. So that's just something that we all need to be reminded of, because it's so easy to do good for a while and then not do good. So we are going to meet in the Zoom room after this. So I'd love to catch up with you in the Zoom room. And also, Shabbat is going out earlier. And so I'm going to start coming on like the original time, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, USA. So this will be the last time that I come on at 2:30. Okay, that's all for now. Hope to see you in the Zoom room. Have a great week. Shalom from Israel.